Great, well done, and thank you to all of our speakers, both before the coffee break and since. What we're hoping to do is really to open some discussion and possibly questions to the floor now. People have been very good and very attentive for quite an amount of time, and we're then going to move into a lunchtime slot, give you a chance to have something to eat and stretch your legs, and we will be coming back quite sharp at 2 because we'll have Minister Ciaran Cuffe to actually launch the report formally. So if people have questions or comments to make, please put up your hand. I think we do have, Dawn has a roving microphone, so just identify yourself and ask a question, and if you want to direct it to a particular speaker, please do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Cathal Kelly from the Equality Authority, and I'm very cheeky to make 3 points. I'm struck from Sheila Green's paper about where she was commenting on the criticisms that are made of research. I'm struck with the similarities that are made about the research in this area with criticisms that were made about research in the 1990s around suicide levels in lesbian, gays, bisexual people. And I'm also struck with the fact that, in fact, those criticisms can be turned around and used for some to criticise some of the research that says, no, this is all wrong, what our research shows. That's just by way of a comment. I have 2 questions. One on the legal side, whether there's anybody's done any work, and whether there's anything that can be gained from looking at the legal situation of step parents. If you leave aside the question of same-sex couples and the ideology that goes around with that, actually is there anything to be learned from how schools handle step parents and in cases of divorce or widowhood and remarriage in purely heterosexual situations, that you can transfer easily over to potentially some of the issues. And then my other question is in terms of the research which actually goes to look at and listen to the voices of the young people themselves, the 3 papers that we've had today. And my question is, has any of it looked at issues around differences or similarities or the inclusion or non-inclusion of differences across the socioeconomic spectrum on that? And the reason I ask that is that I think there can be a perception that the discussion on this kind of issue, as well as the discussion on same-sex marriage without consideration of children, cannot be perceived, and some of the concerns feel that it's a middle-class issue. And I'm just wondering whether that concern is taken account of in any of the research.
Okay. What I might do is just take, if there are a couple of questions and comments, and then I come to the panel and people can respond. So we do there, one on using step families and the kind of lessons that can be learned from that, and then around socioeconomic differences as factors to be considered. So I'll come to the research people around that. If other people have comments or questions, if you'd like to raise your hand and we'll get the microphone to you.
Okay, I'm Anna Carlson-Hyslop. I'm representing something called Children of Lesbian and Gays Everywhere in the UK. And I'd just like to, it's very small, and one thing I want to say is how glad I am that something like B is starting up in Europe, because there doesn't, as far as I'm aware, there's very little of these kind of organisations going in Europe, and I get asked questions, I get people phoning up, is there a support organisation for my daughter or for this student in my school? And I have to say again and again, unfortunately not. So, and that applies for all in Europe. And on the other, I suppose I don't have any specific question, but from my own experience of growing up with a lesbian mother in Sweden, I suppose what I want to say, I'm really glad that this kind of research is coming out, both the UK one, the Stonewall one, and the one here. On the other hand, it's slightly depressing that the kids today are having the same issues that I had as a teenager, and are dealing with it in the same way. The coming out process seems to be the same still. So, and while marriage equality is key, unfortunately it's not going to stop with that. It then is about educating and bringing the issues out in society and making schools and so on less homophobic. And that's a bigger issue. Obviously the two are linked and the two have been touched on here. But basically, even if there is marriage equality, the fight isn't over, I guess is the point.
Yeah, and I think the workshops this afternoon are looking at what are the specific things that educationalists and health might do to the larger battles. In front row, and then I think another one in the back, and I'll come to the panel then.
My name is P.A. McLaughlin from the Northern Ireland Gay Rights Association, and I bear tidings from our fair city to yours and wish you greetings in this very, very important and very impressive gathering that you've managed to get here today. You're dealing with a problem that concerns us to a large extent, but there's an area that I think which concerns us more in Ireland, in particular north and south, that maybe you haven't touched on, and that's the whole area about how the different types of schools will affect the way they deal with the children, because the present British government is relying more and more on faith schools. And I know, of course, in the Republic that 99% of your schools are faith schools, or one way or the other. We have, of course, got an education system in utter chaos at the moment due to a ministry who doesn't know whether she's coming or going. But I mean, you know, we have noticed, as you say, it can be a middle class question, and the big question we always ask in Northern Ireland about everything else is it easier to be a Protestant or a Catholic in such a family?
Thank you. I've got a question at the back, and I think was there a hand up?
Actually, it's more a comment than a question. Firstly, to say well done to everybody who's involved, and I feel incredibly emotional. As a mother of two boys, I really wanted to thank all the adults who were kids brought up in gay families for their courage and generosity in sharing their experience. I'm new to parenting of two boys, feel completely inadequate in the role, but I suppose today I feel really affirmed by your positive experience, and I also feel there's so much for us now to learn, and there's things we can change because you set the agenda and really given us a roadmap of what to do with the law, with the schools, with the health system. So thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Hi, my name is Mary McKenna, and I'm like Denise. I'm new to parenting, and it has changed my whole life. Again, I know I said to Conor and Christine, I mean, you brought a tear to my eye. I was so touched, really, really touched. I just, as a business person, I've been asked to go into a lot of schools and talk about business and being an entrepreneur, and I'm just wondering, is there an opportunity for the likes of Conor and Christine to go into schools? I think it's about education, because you know, I've spoken to a lot of the people in Marriage Equality. I think they're fantastic, but we're judged by people who don't know us. It's people who know us that are with us, and I just wonder, is it more about education and getting people to see, you know, I hate using the word normal, but we are, you know, and getting, you know, people to see us in a normal light and bring education into schools where people go in and talk about your experience. I think you are inspirational, the two of you.
Okay, I take one more from the back, and then we'll come to the panels for responses. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Rita Wild, and I'll try and be brief. I'm also a lesbian parent. The first thing I'd like to say is I just think our children rock. They are really, truly amazing human beings and add considerably to the wealth of humanity. And I'm proud of them all, as if I gave birth to them myself. So that's the first thing, these are great. Two questions really of legal nature that struck me, that I wonder, is there an answer to yet? Or could we begin to see what that answer might be? Firstly, a child born in the UK to a lesbian couple who can have both parents now on the birth certificate, will that be recognised in the Republic? So, if I present the school with a birth certificate with two mothers on it, will the school recognise that? Would be one question. And then the second question would be, legally, can there be any retrospective acknowledgement of parents. So for the like of Christine and Connor, who are no longer children, but there are still implications into their adulthood. You know, can there be legally any retrospective acknowledgement? So those are just two questions. And finally, many congratulations to the organisers of this event. It was a long time coming, and it's great that it's here. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so maybe we'll come to the panellists, and they can indicate themselves which ones they want to respond to. Using the step families, are there lessons there? The socioeconomic differences as factors, the north-south, different school types and faith-based schools, and fundamentally tackling that as an issue. The opportunity to go to schools and, of course, belong to, who are doing wonderful work in Ireland, are going into schools, but I think the question of some of our young people finishing an education and getting degrees and things might put some stop, but certainly I think it's part of the plan for B to be able to support as well as to be doing the advocating for legal change. And then the last two are probably two very specific questions for the legals at the table. A UK-born child with both mothers on the birth cert, is that recognised in Ireland? And secondly, can you have a recognition of retrospective acknowledgement of parenting? And thank people for their positive comments about today. So perhaps maybe, Sheila, can I come to you first? Just in terms of the issues that you'd like to respond to that have just come up there.
I don't know that I have any answers on the step parents. We really, in Ireland, we don't know enough about step parents. I mean, there's a whole area that those of us interested in families have talked about as an area, again, that we know very, very little about. So I think it's another area.
It's another research gap area.
It really is, I'm afraid. In relation to class, it is the case that many of the studies that we have to date have been volunteer samples, and they have tended to be, a lot of them, primarily middle class. But one big study in the States where they did a national study of a very large number of families, and then picked up on the lesbian gay families that were in that sample, they had a bigger mix of classes, as you might expect, because they weren't volunteer participants. But again, I think it would be very important in any future research that might be done here to make a particular effort that across the board in terms of classes that you get as representative a sample as possible. But it probably is the case, in fact, that the people who have the resources and the confidence to enter into this very often may be more likely to be middle class. And on the faith school thing, I think the issues are relatively obvious. That I don't think it needs to be like that in all faith schools. I'm sure there are more tolerant and more liberal expressions of faith. But certainly it would seem that in the little we know about the Irish context, and we know more than we did, the ethos of the school, whether it be faith-based or multi-denominational or whatever, is very critical to the comfort and the support that the children get.
Great, thank you. And if I could come to the panel here around the two legal questions that came up, maybe, I don't know, Jeffrey or I suppose it's specifically about Ireland, so I don't know if you feel confident to give us an opinion, but there are two very specific questions about recognition and retrospection. Current situation around that, Jeffrey, just an opinion that we won't hold you to.
Yeah, I suppose I should start off by saying that I'm sort of in a difficult space this morning as chairman of the adoption board. I don't want to make...
Yeah, just hold it.
Yeah. I suppose I'm in a difficult space. I'm not going to be making any public comment on adoption. It would not be appropriate for me as chairman of the Adoption Authority. You've raised a really interesting and fundamental question, which revolves, there are two options. The first is that we apply Irish law, which would be problematic. The second is we respect the law of the foreign jurisdiction, and we apply what's called private international law. And the outcome would be a positive outcome if that were to occur. This issue has yet to be considered by the High Court in this jurisdiction. So ultimately it will be a matter for the High Court and probably ultimately the Supreme Court to decide that issue. So I hope, you understand that, you know, I have a view myself as to perhaps what should happen, but, you know, I don't think it would be wise for me this morning perhaps to offer that view. The second issue, just as on the issue on education, I felt, certainly for me, that's a key issue. I do think it's about, you know, what I suppose the questioner stated there, and that is it's about reaching out to Middle Ireland to communicate that message. I think that happened this morning in the context of both Conor and Christine, and I think that that's what needs to happen in terms of bringing the message of normality to Middle Ireland. I think it's all about education. I think that's a key message, and one that needs to be communicated. In relation to the second question, the second legal question addressed, there is a decision of our Supreme Court that legislation cannot, or decisions cannot be applied retrospectively. So that's just on the technical legal issue, that is the position. So I hope that's been helpful.
Thank you very much, Jeffrey. And could I just give the last word to Christine, to Conor here. Just a final comment that you'd like to either share or something that was strict that you'd like to share.
Can I make a point of information?
Sorry?
Could I ask a point of information on what the...
Very quickly.
Is there not a duty on the Southern Government, the Government of the Irish Republic, under the agreement with Northern Ireland, that they will actually harmonise the two laws, and that therefore Rita's question, since she is coming from Northern Ireland, not just the UK, it's actually Northern Ireland, which has a special relationship with the Republic, and therefore there will be some duty on the High Court to recognise it.
Yeah, that's going to be a key issue for the High Court to decide, and that's really the whole issue of private international law that kicks in looking at that issue. But ultimately it's going to be down to, I suppose, the High Court judge that hears this case, the view of the High Court, and ultimately the view of the Supreme Court. I think the argument that you put forward is a compelling argument, but ultimately it won't be for me or for anybody in the audience to decide this matter. It will ultimately matter for the courts.
Thank you.
Thank you. Last word.
You don't like being put on the spot. I want to thank everybody here for their overwhelming support actually during the coffee break, and just coming over and thanking me for telling me my story. And like the intentions of B is to be here for young people that are coming up through the ranks that will replace us when we stop fighting, which probably won't happen, and to give that support. So to answer you, we will be doing education. Education is the most important thing. It's only through education and through reaching out to people that you can change the mindset. And the problem I find with the mass majority of Irish people is they'll agree with something but they won't say it out loud. So you have to let them hear it and then give them the chance to actually have their opinions heard about something, even if they are sitting on the fence and they're not quite sure, and you sway them. You can only get to people by educating them. So I would love to go wreck the heads of people in school and bore the crap out of them by telling them what it was like growing up. But again, it's all in the future, and hopefully we will be able to do that.
And just on that, I think it's both in a, yeah, absolutely, we were talking about at the beginning about going into schools and talking, but then also going, I suppose it's more Peter's point, about faith-based schools and just making it national policy that has to be implemented, in terms of, in the same way that you have education about different sexual orientations, just make this about different families. And that's, I think that's one way of getting through it, making sure that the school's ethos does not play any part of this. And they just don't have a choice. The other thing I need to point out is we're not, like we're just the face of B today, and there is another group of people over here and a couple of other people. So, you know, they're very much involved in this, and they're just as much involved in the research and everything like that. So I'd just like to thank them for participating as well.
Well done. Okay, 1 point from the back, and we'll wrap it up.
Excuse me for walking out from behind the camera. Just on the education thing, I was involved for more than 10 years in going into schools and talking about what it was like as a gay man living in Ireland. And in the early parts, it was all about the gays. But as years went on and attitudes were changing in society, one of the things that came out the strongest issue of all for the students was what was it like for young people growing up in gay families. So there is a need, and the schools do look for it, because they asked us if we knew of any young people who would do it, but that was a few years ago, so maybe you would follow up on that.
Great. Okay, thank you very much. So what we're going to do now is I want to formally thank everyone who's spoken this morning. I know most of you are actually staying for the rest of the afternoon. There'll be a few more people joining us over lunchtime who weren't able to be here this morning. As you know, the seminar was completely oversubscribed. Just if people are leaving or going outside, there were some protesters outside who didn't register and wanted to foist themselves in, and for health and safety reasons we obviously couldn't allow them in. So they're perhaps not terribly happy. So just to be careful going outside, and I know the police were there earlier on, so just to let you know about that. So we're going to break for lunch now. We're going to be back here bang on 2 o'clock with the Minister. Thank you all very much.